Hi folks, this video is intended to be a guide for church leaders and worship leaders looking to stream their services online, and specifically considers what you need to do with regard to copyright licensing in order to stay legal as you try to keep your congregations meeting together remotely, be it on YouTube, Zoom, StreamMonkey, or whatever else you're using. Hopefully copyright as a concept isn't new to you, and you're probably watching this with some familiarity with CCLI or One License. I'll focus on products offered by CCLI because that's what my church uses, but the concepts explained are the same if your church uses One License. The products are probably just different. Just in case you're watching this wondering what CCLI or One License is, I'll just briefly cover the basics of copyright licensing. Now this is based on copyright law in the UK, so things may differ if your church is based elsewhere in the world. Now, copyright is an internationally recognised idea, albeit some countries enforce it more rigorously than others, but the specific laws might vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, so just make sure that you're following the rules of the land wherever you are. Copyright is a form of intellectual property law and is a protection that's afforded to creative works, for example, music, literature, and photographs, that ensures that the creator of a given work is fairly remunerated when someone else uses that work. And as the name applies, a copyright is the right to copy the work. Copyright is not something that you need to apply for or register, such as a patent or a trademark. And if you create something that is legally copyrightable, then you are the copyright holder for that work. Now, not all things are subject to copyright. For example, although a melody you compose would be copyrightable, nobody owns the copyright on a musical scale. The individual rights holder has the right to determine when and how a given work can be used by others, and while your church could in theory approach each individual rights holder for each creative work that you wanted to license, that's pretty impractical. Just think about the amount of music and lyrics and videos, etc. that your church might use in a given year. So instead, organisations such as Christian Copyright Licensing International, CCLI, or One License exist to negotiate licenses with the majority of rights holders or other representative agencies on your behalf, and you only need to obtain a license through them. It's easier and it's cheaper than trying to do it all yourself. There are two aspects of copyright that sometimes make it difficult to understand. I definitely found that when I was researching all of this. Firstly, it's not always immediately apparent what constitutes a creative work. Something you might think of as being one creative work may in fact be a combination of individual creative works. So a worship song, for example, is made up of an underlying composition, which is one creative work, as well as the recording by a specific artist, both of which are different creative works and are licensed separately, even if ultimately it's the same person who owns the copyright on both. The other aspect of copyright that's complicated is the terminology that's used to describe what you can and cannot do with a creative work. And understanding this is the key to understanding the different licenses that you require to purchase based on what activities your church undertakes. Now, before I look in detail at streaming, let's consider briefly life before COVID, when people gathered in your church to worship on a Sunday, or maybe you had other midweek activities physically in your building. Now, in those halcyon days, your worship band most likely played worship songs live for your congregation. And if they each played from their own copy of a music book, and your congregation sang from hymn books, then you wouldn't even need a copyright license. And the reason for this is that the license required to perform someone else's composition, the performance rights, which are issued by the Performing Rights Society for Music on behalf of its members, are in fact waived for acts of worship. And the rights that are required to reproduce the lyrics, the print rights, were paid for by the publisher of your music and hymn books. Of course, in many churches those lyrics are either printed on a weekly hymn sheet or they're projected on a screen. And if that's the case in your church, then you should have purchased print rights from CCLI or One License. CCLI provide these in their church copyright license, and if you have the church copyright license, then you're also permitted to record the music in your services for limited distribution to those who can't attend in person. Now, these are called mechanical rights. I guess that's because in the old days there were some mechanics involved in pressing vinyl records. I don't really know. If your musicians don't all have their own music books and they photocopy or reproduce sheet music from books or digital downloads, then you'll also need to purchase the music reproduction license, and that covers the copyright related to the sheet music that someone created. Another common occurrence in days gone by would be the playing of music CDs in church premises, for example, during midweek parents and toddlers groups. Now, if you did that, then you need to consider two things. Firstly, the performance rights. Yes, even though you are playing a CD, a creative work is still being performed by someone, so the composer of the song needs to be compensated. And as this isn't an act of worship, the license fee is no longer waived. Secondly, you also need to consider the master rights, and those are the rights that are associated with the artist who actually recorded the tracks you're playing. Performance rights have to be granted from PRS for music. Now, CCLI are an agent for PRS and can provide you with a license which is venue specific. So that just means that you might need more than one license if you have separate campuses or even a church hall that isn't linked to your own church building. The master rights are administered by Phonographic Performance Limited, PPL, and again, CCLI are an agent and can provide this license for your church. And you need to be aware that these licenses are limited to using music in your church. You can't play it anywhere else, i.e. online. Which almost brings us on to streaming. Now, there are a couple of other licenses that you need to bear in mind before we get on to the streaming part. If your church uses film and TV clips, you'll need a license to show that video, even during an act of worship. And that's provided by CCLI's Church Video License. The other license to consider is the CLA Church License. Now, CLA is the Copyright Licensing Agency, yes, it's another one, which deals with non-music print productions like journals, study books, children's activity books, etc. So if you want to photocopy printed media, which doesn't explicitly grant permission to do so, then you will need this license. Right, now we're on to streaming. So far, we have talked about performance rights, master rights, print rights, and mechanical rights. All of these are still relevant to streaming your worship service online, plus there's one more, synchronization rights. Synchronization rights are the right to use a piece of music in combination with a visual component. Now, the obvious example of this is the use of a famous song in a film. So when that film was produced, the film producers needed to purchase synchronization rights to use the music alongside what they had filmed. Now, it may be less obvious, but when you stream a video of your church service, which includes a piece of music, this is the legal equivalent of that, and you need to purchase synchronization rights in addition to all the other rights we've discussed. These synchronization rights are what are included in the CCLI streaming license. So if you want to stream your church service online, you need this license. In addition, this license includes the print rights that are required to show the lyrics as part of your stream as well. But as with all copyright matters, it's not that simple. So firstly, performance rights. Now, performance rights are not waived for streaming, even if the stream is an act of worship. And even if you have the PRS for Music license from CCLI, that only covers your physical building. And somewhat counterintuitively, the performance rights required to stream online are not included in the CCLI streaming license either. So you may need to license them. I say may because if you choose to stream your service on YouTube or Facebook, then those platforms already have agreements in place with PRS for Music. so you don't actually need to acquire any additional performance rights yourself. However, before you decide to go with these platforms and save yourself some money, just bear in mind how they operate. When you live stream something to YouTube, from that point on, YouTube controls that content. YouTube and Facebook implement a copyright management system called Content ID. Now, this is a very sophisticated automated system that scans your videos and identifies music in them. They can then allow the copyright holder to decide what to do with your video. Now, they can choose to do nothing. They can choose to monetize your video, i.e. put adverts in it and then take the revenue. They can block it in certain regions, or they can request that it be taken down entirely, in which case you'll get a copyright strike from YouTube. So 3 strikes and your YouTube channel gets shut down. Now the reason for this is to do with those synchronization rights that I mentioned earlier. In general, sync rights are licensed separately for each combination of music and video. There's no way for YouTube or Facebook to license sync rights in bulk to cover the thousands of videos being uploaded every minute. Therefore, their Content ID system is a means of giving individual rights holders control over the unlicensed synchronization of their music after the fact. Now, unlike the wider world, CCLI have coordinated licensing of sync rights across their entire catalogue of Christian music publishers. But YouTube and Facebook don't know that your church has acquired sync rights, so your videos will still be subject to Content ID advertising or blocking. CCLI even state this in their streaming license terms. The alternative approach is to stream directly to your own website, or in some cases churches are using things like Zoom and Skype. If you do this, you need to remember that you are then responsible for licensing the performance rights required. CCLI do not provide a license that includes performance rights for streaming online. And this is where something called the Limited Online Music License comes in. This is something that you have to buy directly from PRS for music. And this license allows you to get performance rights that apply to online music. It's based on whether your stream is interactive or not, i.e. can viewers pause or rewind, and the number of stream views in a year, e.g. viewers per live stream multiplied by the number of streams you do in a year. So if you've acquired all of these licenses, then you're now free to stream your worship services online with just one limitation. The songs all need to be performed by your own worship band. If you want to play songs recorded by other artists, then you need to license the master rights to do that. And your CCLI PPL license, so the license that would cover master rights for playing CDs in your church building, does not cover streaming. So in order to do this, rather than buying just the ordinary CCLI streaming license, instead you'll need to buy the CCLI Streaming Plus license. And this includes the master rights for CCLI's catalogue of Christian music publishers. Now, a word on music videos. If you use YouTube as your source of worship songs for your stream rather than your own band, you'll find that there are a mixture of official music videos and those that have been uploaded by individuals. The official music videos will indicate if you can redistribute them, and if they don't, you should check with the publisher. Bear in mind the master rights provided by the CCLI Streaming Plus license cover only the audio, so the video associated with it is a separate creative work that is not covered by the CCLI streaming license. Non-official lyrics videos should really be avoided because you don't necessarily know the source of the video content. The uploader, even if they give permission, may not have the right to the content used unless they've produced it themselves. The alternative is that you can use official lyric videos that are produced and licensed for the purpose of streaming, for example, worshiplyricvideos.com. Even with all these licenses in place, there are some things that you just cannot stream. And the first one is film clips. The CCLI Church Video License, if you have it, does not cover streaming. So if you show a film clip in your service, you will need to block that in your live stream, or else pre-clear it separately with the relevant rights holder. The second thing is using music not covered by CCLI's catalogue of music publishers. Although the limited online music license provides broader performance rights, it provides neither sync rights nor master rights. And your Streaming Plus license from CCLI only includes master and sync rights for the CCLI catalogue of publishers. That does include the vast majority of Christian worship songs. However, there are a few that are not covered which might surprise you, and it's unlikely to include secular artists. Now, it's true that currently PRS for Music are including sync rights in LOML until the 31st of June 2021, but when these disappear, you'll have no sync rights for non-Christian music, so won't be allowed to include it at all in the live stream, unless you pre-clear it with the rights holder. And even until then, you won't have the master rights for those artists, and we need to pre-clear those with the rights holder too. So in my opinion, it's not worth including the sync rights option when you buy your LOML license. Finally, there are grand rights works, which I've not mentioned. These are musical productions and basically aren't covered by any of these licenses. But unless your church is putting on a production of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, then it's probably not that big a deal. So that's it. That was probably a lot to take in, but hopefully it helps you make sense of what licenses you require and what you can and can't do with regard to streaming. Put any questions you have in the comments and do share this video with anyone that you think it will help.